On a crisp October evening, golden lights spilled across the entrance of Le Victoria, a high-end restaurant in Midtown Manhattan. Inside, the former students of Franklin High's Class 11C gathered after more than a decade apart. Familiar faces, now touched by time. Some heavier, some grayer, some dressed in designer suits, all radiating a sense of self-importance. Matthew Carter arrived late. He stepped into the glamorous space wearing a simple gray suit, no flashy brands, his eyes quietly scanning the room, full of laughter and clinking glasses. "Matthew, is that really you?" came a warm voice. It was Sarah Lee, once a quiet, kind-hearted student, now the director of a community education center, the first person to recognize him. "Yeah," Matthew nodded, a gentle smile in his eyes. "Long time." Before they could say more, a loud burst of laughter rang from the central table. Michael Harris, former basketball captain and now the CEO of a tech startup, lifted his glass and said loudly, "So Carter showed up, huh? What are you doing these days?" "Still washing dishes." Laughter rippled across the room like a wave. Someone added, "Weren't you supposed to be the smartest in our class? Should have been a doctor or something." Jenna, Matthew's old high school girlfriend, sat beside Michael. Dressed in Chanel, she glanced at Matthew, up and down, not smiling, not speaking, but the disdain in her expression was clear as glass. Matthew didn't flinch. He quietly took a seat at the edge of the table beside Sarah. A flicker passed through his eyes, not anger, not pride, something older, heavier. A memory had been stirred. 17-year-old Matthew Carter didn't have a suit, or a diploma, or anyone in his life besides his mother, Elaine, a night shift nurse barely holding things together. His father had abandoned them when Matthew was 10, leaving behind debt and a silence no one dared to speak of. Their apartment in the labor housing district always smelled like old grease and mildew. Each night, Matthew worked at Tony's Deli, scrubbing pans and dishes till 2 a.m. Each morning, he tried to make it to school with eyes heavy and raw under a threadbare hoodie. He had once loved Jenna, teenage love, naive and full of dreams, until he told her he was dropping out of school. "We live in different worlds now, Matt," she had said. The day after, Michael had shouted across the gym, "The smart kid's quitting school to wash dishes." Can you believe that? The cafeteria exploded with laughter. Matthew kept walking, shame burning in his chest. No one stopped him when he walked out of Franklin High for the last time. Michael continued boasting about his new office in Austin, a $5 million investment round, and wild parties in Miami. Jenna nodded distractedly, scrolling on her phone. Matthew sat in silence, a ghost in the middle of their golden parade. Sarah leaned in, whispering, "Are you okay?" Matthew smiled faintly, his voice low. "Yeah, just remembering the nights I used to scrub marinara sauce off plates at Tony's." Sarah looked at him, a soft sadness in her eyes. He added, "They think I disappeared, but no one ever asked why." Just as the laughter hit its peak, a server quietly entered and whispered to the restaurant manager. The front doors opened. A man in a flowing white robe and keffiyeh walked in. Those who read Forbes might recognize him. Sheikh Omar Al-Zayani, a billionaire from Dubai. All heads turned. The sheikh walked straight toward Matthew, the modest man at the corner of the table, and embraced him tightly. "My brother. MashaAllah. Why didn't you tell me you were in New York?" Matthew stood and responded fluently in Arabic. "I wanted it to be a surprise." "I missed you too, Sheikh Omar." Michael froze. Jenna's eyes widened. Sarah simply smiled. The silence that followed Sheikh Omar's entrance was so profound it could have swallowed the hum of the chandeliers above. Forks hovered midair, half-filled wine glasses frozen in hand. No one at the reunion had expected anything remotely like this. Michael Harris, once the loudest voice in the room, now stood as still as a statue, mouth slightly ajar. Jenna gripped her wine stem a bit too tightly. Sarah, sitting beside Matthew, exchanged a quiet glance with him, as if to say, "Now they know." "I didn't mean to interrupt," Sheikh Omar said in perfect English, turning to the room with a smile. "I just came to greet my dear friend and partner, Matthew Carter. I was in the city and couldn't resist surprising him." He turned back to Matthew and lowered his voice with warmth. You really kept your promise. 8 locations now. Working on a ninth, Matthew replied, returning the hug. The sheik grinned broadly. Mashallah, I knew you'd do it. As Sheikh Omar turned to leave, clearly just dropping by, he added, I'll see you in Dubai next month. Dinner at my home, and please bring Sarah. He gave her a nod of recognition. I've heard about your work. And just like that, the billionaire exited as quickly as he came. What remained was an air so thick with tension, it could be cut with a butter knife. For a full minute, no one spoke. Then, predictably, the questions began. Wait, the Sheikh Omar? Like Al-Zayani Group. I saw him on CNBC last week. Matthew, are you famous? Do you know Arabic? What's going on here? Matthew looked around calmly, his posture relaxed, not boastful. He held up a hand. I'm not famous. I'm not a celebrity. I'm just someone who worked hard and caught a few lucky breaks. Michael leaned in, tried to reassert dominance. Hold on. Are you saying you're what? His business partner? Matthew nodded once. Yes, but more than that, I'm the founder and CEO of True Flame Restaurants. Gasps erupted. A couple of people instinctively pulled out their phones, Googling the name. Sure enough, the results flashed instantly. True Flame, a fine dining restaurant chain specializing in modern American cuisine with multicultural influence. Headquartered in New York, locations across the U.S., including Miami, Boston, San Francisco, and even Dubai. Someone whispered, Holy crap, he's a big deal. But Matthew wasn't done. I started with one restaurant. It wasn't fancy, just a corner place in Newark. 1 grill, 2 walks, 3 folding tables. But people came, and they told others. We didn't sell food. We told stories with flavors. And when Sheikh Omar tasted our smoked brisket with date chutney, he offered to fund our expansion on the condition that I never stop being the dishwasher who dreams. There was a pause. Michael tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. Wow, that's impressive, Carter. Really? I mean, who would have thought, right? Matthew tilted his head slightly. Certainly not you. The table tensed. Michael's jaw clenched. I meant, he added quickly, you never mentioned anything in the group chat. I wasn't in the group chat, Matthew replied simply. That single sentence carried more weight than an entire speech. Later, as the evening continued and the meal was served, the conversation slowly shifted from awkward tension to genuine curiosity. People began asking Matthew more respectful questions. How he got started, what his vision was, what inspired him. To every question, he answered with grace. No bitterness, no gloating. He didn't mention the night he slept in his car behind the deli, or the times he had to choose between electricity and food. He didn't bring up the moments of self-doubt, the betrayals, or the deals that nearly bankrupted him. But Sarah knew. She'd been there, in small ways, even when others disappeared. She'd sent a message the night he dropped out. You don't need a diploma to be brilliant. At one point during dessert, she leaned toward him. Why didn't you tell anyone sooner? Matthew looked down at the spoon, scooping chocolate mousse. Because I wanted to walk into this room the same way I left it. Quietly, on my own terms. Sarah smiled. I'm glad you did. Then came the bill. Michael, eager to save face, waved the waiter over. Hey, I've got this one, he said grandly, reaching for his black card. But the server politely shook his head. Actually, sir, the bill has already been taken care of. Michael blinked. By who? The server glanced at Matthew. Mr. Carter prepaid in full. Champagne included. Eyes turned again. Matthew raised his glass quietly and said with genuine calm, to old friends and new beginnings. The table erupted into polite claps, but Sarah's was the only one that felt real. As the evening ended, people came up to Matthew one by one, some offering sheepish apologies, others asking for his card, a few just stunned into silence. Jenna approached too. You look different, she said, trying to smile. Matthew looked her in the eyes. So do you? She tried again. I always believed you'd do something big. He didn't reply, just offered a polite nod, then turned to talk to Sarah. Outside the restaurant, as Sarah waited with him for a cab, she said quietly, that was one of the most satisfying evenings I've ever had. Matthew chuckled. You mean seeing Michael's ego deflate? Among other things, she smiled. But mostly, seeing you still being you. The cab pulled up. He opened the door for her. I'm glad you came. She paused. Do you still believe in starting over? Matthew held her gaze. I believe in second chances. For people who mean it. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, I'm opening my 8th location in Seattle next month. There'll be an opening gala. You should come. I will, she said, stepping inside. As the cab pulled away, Matthew stood under the street lamp for a moment, alone again. But this time not forgotten. This time, remembered and respected. The week following the reunion was a whirlwind of unexpected messages. Matthew Carter's inbox, usually quiet, suddenly filled with subject lines like, great seeing you again. So proud of you. Let's catch up soon. Many were from people who had barely acknowledged his existence in high school. Some hadn't even looked his way at the reunion until Sheikh Omar walked in. Now, they were lifelong friends, eager to reconnect. But Matthew didn't respond to most of them. There was only one message he opened right away. It came from Sarah, still thinking about Friday night. You made a lot of people rethink who they are. I hope you know that. He smiled and replied simply, coming from you, that means everything. Inside a modern glass building on the edge of Manhattan's west side, the headquarters of True Flame buzzed quietly with efficiency. The open floor plan was filled with greenery, art, and the smell of fresh coffee. But the real heart of the office was a glass-walled room with a round table, Matthew's space. He sat at that table now, reviewing a presentation for the Seattle opening. A knock at the door interrupted him. His assistant poked her head in. There's someone here to see you. Said he doesn't have an appointment, but he's persistent. Matthew raised an eyebrow. Name? Michael Harris. Matthew blinked. Send him in. Michael entered the office with the awkward posture of someone who never expected to walk into the office of the man he once mocked. He wore a wrinkled blazer and a tie that didn't match. The confident, cocky gleam he once carried had been dulled, replaced with something else. Regret, maybe, or desperation. Matthew, he said, trying to smile. Michael, Matthew nodded. You're up early for someone who usually sleeps through brunch. Michael tried to chuckle, but failed. Can I sit? Matthew gestured to the chair across the table. For a few moments, neither said anything. Then Michael exhaled sharply. I won't waste your time. My company's gone under. We burned through capital faster than expected. Bad hires. Poor planning. I didn't listen to advice. Now I owe more than I can repay, and investors are threatening legal action. He looked up, eyes raw. I've reached out to everyone. No one will meet me. They say I'm a risk. Even Jen is gone. Took what little I had left. Matthew didn't blink. He let the silence do its work. Michael leaned forward. I know I don't deserve it. After what I said to you, what we all said, I wouldn't help me either. Matthew finally spoke, calm and measured. But you came here anyway. I did, Michael nodded. Because you're the only one who might still believe in redemption. Matthew stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the Hudson River. You were cruel, he said, but not unique. Everyone laughed. You just laughed loudest. Michael swallowed hard. But I remember one thing about you, Matthew continued. You were a hell of a strategist in student council. You knew how to pitch an idea, read a room, close a deal. He turned to face Michael. I'm expanding True Flame. I need someone who knows how to build marketing campaigns, someone who's hit rock bottom and knows what failure tastes like, someone who's got everything to prove. Michael's breath caught. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance, Matthew said, but not to save you. I'm offering you work, not mercy. Earn your way back, and never forget where you came from again. Michael stood slowly, eyes glistening. I won't. I swear I won't. A week later, True Flame Training Kitchen. Michael wore a white apron and hairnet. He wasn't in a boardroom. He was in the test kitchen, shadowing a team of chefs, learning the story behind each dish. Matthew had insisted, you can't market what you don't understand. There was no shortcut to humility. Sarah stopped by one afternoon and saw him there. Well, she said, this is a sight I never thought I'd see. Michael chuckled. Believe me, neither did I. Matthew told me he brought you in. He did, Michael nodded. Didn't lecture me. Didn't throw my words back in my face. Just offer me a shot. Sarah studied him. You're lucky. Most people don't get that kind of grace. I know. Michael replied quietly. And I'm going to earn it. Later that month, it was a crisp evening under fairy lights and soft jazz. The Seattle skyline stretched behind a crowd of guests, investors, media, food critics. Matthew stood at the front of the stage, calm and poised. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began. This is more than a restaurant. It's the eighth flame in a journey that began behind a sink, with a bucket full of dishes and a head full of dreams. A pause. People often ask me what the secret is. It's not the sauces. It's not the investors. It's not even Sheikh Omar. He smiled. It's remembering where I came from, and who stood beside me even when I had nothing, and who came back when they had nothing left. He gestured toward the crowd. Michael stood at the back, next to Sarah. Matthew lifted his glass. To every broken beginning, to the ones who rise after the fall. Cheers echoed through the rooftop. The night was filled with warmth, laughter, and the smell of food that told stories. 3 months had passed since Michael Harris became part of the True Flame team. In that time, he had gone from shadowing kitchen staff to developing a full-scale rebranding campaign for the company's 10th location. He arrived early, stayed late, asked questions, and listened more than he spoke. A version of Michael that few, if any, had ever met. But success, even in its early form, doesn't erase the past. And for Michael, the weight of past arrogance still clung to him like smoke on a jacket. 2 years earlier, Michael had stood on the rooftop of his luxury condo in Austin, sipping champagne, watching the sun set over the city skyline. I built this from nothing, he'd said to his guests, young venture capitalists and former classmates who now vied for his approval. I didn't need luck, just vision. Behind him, Jenna clinked glasses with an investor. Her eyes drifted toward Michael only when the laughter got too loud. What none of them knew, what Michael didn't even admit to himself, was that the cracks were already forming. The app his company built had flopped in beta testing. Key developers were leaving. Lawsuits loomed. But pride is a dangerous shield. It hides the truth even from those who carry it. Back to present. One afternoon, Matthew received a package from an old mentor. Inside was a copy of Forbes magazine. The cover? True Flame. Headline, From Dishwasher to Dynasty, The Rise of Matthew Carter. He placed it in a drawer without comment. At that moment, Michael knocked on the office door, carrying 2 coffee cups. You look like you could use a break, he said. Matthew took the coffee with a nod. Thanks. Michael looked uneasy. I wanted to ask, how do you stay grounded? I mean, with all this. He gestured around the sleek office. Matthew smiled, almost wistfully. Because I still remember what it felt like to be invisible. Michael nodded slowly. I think I'm starting to get that. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Michael stayed back to polish a presentation. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. Jenna. He hesitated, then picked up. Hi, she said, her voice quieter than he remembered. What's going on? He asked. I saw the article. About Matthew. And you. And I wanted to say, she paused. You were never the problem, Michael. I was chasing something that didn't exist. I'm sorry. Michael closed his eyes. I think we both were. There was silence. Then Jenna said, I heard your old investors are circling again. Some are blaming you for their losses. Be careful. Michael's jaw tightened. Thanks for the warning. She hung up. For the first time in years, her voice hadn't made him feel powerful. It made him feel small. But strangely, that felt right. The next day, news broke that a former investor from Michael's failed startup had filed a defamation claim. It wasn't just against him, but it named True Flame as a host company knowingly harboring unethical conduct. The press smelled blood. Blogs speculated. Headlines suggested Matthew had taken in a disgraced entrepreneur. Comments exploded online. Matthew called Michael into his office. I read it. Michael said, walking in before Matthew could speak. And I understand if you need to let me go. Matthew leaned back in his chair. I brought you in knowing your past. I didn't do it for charity. I did it because you needed to prove yourself. And you did. But this could damage you, Michael said, voice low. Matthew raised an eyebrow. Michael, have you forgotten where I started? There's no headline that scares me. He leaned forward. Let them dig. The truth is, I've watched you work harder these last 3 months than most people do in 3 years. And the people who matter, they'll see that. Michael's eyes welled up. Why are you like this? Why aren't you angry? Matthew looked out the window. Because I've been you, and someone gave me a chance. 1 week later, Seattle, True Flame's 10th opening. Reporters gathered. Food critics sampled. And in the middle of it all stood Matthew and Michael, side by side. A journalist asked bluntly, "Mr. Carter, how do you respond to accusations about your marketing director's past failures?" Matthew replied without hesitation, "I respond by pointing you to the success of this launch, to the team he helped lead, and to the numbers we'll show you in 3 months. But the risk. There's always risk," Matthew cut in. "But there's also redemption. And I don't invest in ghosts. I invest in people." The room fell silent for a beat. Then applause. And from the corner, Sarah watched with a hand on her chest, tears in her eyes. Later that night, on the hotel balcony, overlooking Seattle's sparkling waterfront, Matthew and Michael stood with glasses of cider. "You saved me," Michael said. Matthew shook his head. "No, you saved yourself. I just didn't stop you." Michael looked down at the city below. "You ever think, maybe we're all just waiting for the right person to believe in us?" Matthew smiled. "Yeah, but sometimes we also have to believe in ourselves first." Seattle's crisp air carried a sense of celebration. The soft glow of string lights cast a golden shimmer over the rooftop of True Flame's newest location, nestled in the heart of the city's arts district. The scent of seared salmon with citrus glaze, roasted root vegetables, and rosemary drifted from the open-air kitchen. Guests in elegant coats sipped cocktails, laughed, and marveled at the panoramic view of the Space Needle and Puget Sound. It was True Flame's grandest opening yet. Location number 8. Matthew Carter stood at the edge of the rooftop, gazing over the crowd. His hands rested calmly in the pockets of his tailored coat. To most, he looked composed, powerful, untouchable even. But inside, he was remembering something very different. 13 years earlier, Newark, New Jersey. Matthew, 17 and exhausted, stood behind Tony's Deli, tossing a cracked mop into the dumpster. His hands were blistered. His stomach growled. His mother's medical bills sat unopened in a drawer at home. He leaned back against the brick wall and stared at the sky. There were no stars, just smoke from nearby rooftops and the dull flicker of a dying street lamp. He'd whispered to himself that night, "One day, I'll build something. And when I do, I won't forget how this feels." Back in Seattle, present, the microphone squeaked once, then stilled. All eyes turned to the stage. Matthew stepped forward, his silhouette framed against the city skyline. "Good evening," he began. "Tonight is a celebration of more than just food or growth. It's about fire, the kind you carry inside you when no one believes in you, the kind that keeps you going when you have every reason to quit." He paused. The room hushed. "When I started True Flame, I didn't want to create a brand. I wanted to create a table where stories could be served with every dish, where someone, anyone, could sit down and be reminded that their past does not define their future." Applause rumbled. Matthew scanned the crowd and landed on Sarah. She stood in the front row, wearing a burgundy dress, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "And tonight," he continued, "I want to acknowledge the people who helped me carry that fire." He gestured to Sarah, to the friend who never looked away. She smiled softly. Then he pointed toward Michael, standing humbly at the edge of the crowd, to the man who once fell hard, but chose to stand up again, not with pride, but with purpose. Michael's eyes glistened. Matthew lifted his glass. "To the 8th flame, and to the ones that keep burning quietly, persistently, inside all of us." The rooftop erupted in applause. Some people cheered. Others wiped their eyes. The band resumed. Lights twinkled. Waiters served the first courses, and laughter returned to the space. Later that night, Matthew found a moment of solitude near the edge of the rooftop. Sarah joined him, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You made it poetic," she said. "I meant every word," he replied, taking 1 glass from her. She looked at him for a long moment. "You never told me. What would you have done if this hadn't worked out?" Matthew thought about it. "I would have started over. Somewhere else. Maybe a food truck. Maybe a roadside grill. I just never wanted to quit being me." Sarah nodded. "You haven't. There was a pause. You know, she said with a small smile, people will remember this night for years. Matthew looked out over the city. I don't need them to remember the night. I just want them to remember that failure isn't the end, and kindness isn't weakness. She turned toward him. So what's next? He smiled, a flicker of something brighter than ambition in his eyes. Maybe it's time to build more than restaurants. A few weeks later, invitation delivered. All members of the original 11C class received a package in the mail, a sleek envelope with gold trim. Inside an invitation. You are cordially invited to the grand opening of True Flame Venice, our first international restaurant in Europe. Join us in celebration, in healing, and in honoring the journey that brought us here. At the bottom, in Matthew's handwriting, you're not here because of who you were. You're here because of who you chose to become. Venice, Italy. Cobbled streets. Gondolas drifting in silence. Soft music from a street violinist. In the center of the floating city, True Flame Venice stood proudly beside the canal. Candlelight flickered in the windows. A crowd of international guests filled the terrace. Matthew stood beneath the archway, watching as Michael led a team of new hires, each one with their own story of hardship. Sarah coordinated a local school fundraiser tied to the event. Matthew closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them to a world he'd built not from spite, but from grace. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to laugh, not bitter, not small, not forced, but the kind of laugh that belongs only to someone who survived, forgave, and still believed.